Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports another case of the new coronavirus, bringing the total in the country to 28. China, meanwhile, reports more than 100 deaths in a single day, as the WHO warns that worse could be coming. South Korea is projected to make tens of billions of dollars off the success of the film Parasite, named Best Picture at the Oscars, and from the popularity of the boy band BTS. And we take a look at ways to protect jobs, both blue and white collar, as the rise of artificial intelligence threatens to take on many roles until now performed by human beings. It's 4 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. We start with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak. Just this morning, South Korea reported one additional confirmed case of the virus. For the latest, we have our Kim Jae-hee on the line for us. Jae-hee, what do we know about this latest case?
Devin, the Central Accident Prevention Division said on Tuesday, South Korea's 28th confirmed case is a 30-year-old Chinese woman. The woman was already under self-quarantine when she was tested positive for the virus and is now at the Myeongji hospitals. She's suspected to have contracted the virus from an acquaintance of hers, a man in his 50s who was the third person in South Korea to test positive for the virus on January 26th after coming back from Wuhan. So far, the number of people tested for the coronavirus in South Korea has topped 3,600. Of the total, more than 2,700 have turned out negative, and over 860 people are currently in quarantine, waiting for the results of their tests. Out of the 28 confirmed cases in Korea, 4 patients have fully recovered and have been discharged from the hospital.
And Jae-hee, I hear the South Korean government has announced new measures to try and keep the virus out. Tell us more about those.
Right. The Central Accident Prevention Division says that starting today, medical institutions in the country will be able to check whether a patient has recently visited a country that has confirmed coronavirus cases. Starting Tuesday, patients' travel history to Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, and Macau will be accessible in hospitals and pharmacies. Japan will be included in the list starting Thursday, and Taiwan and Malaysia will be added starting next Monday. The government has also advised citizens to refrain from traveling to the following 6 countries: Singapore, Japan, Malaysia, Vietnam, Thailand, and Taiwan. This is aimed at preventing the virus from entering South Korea through countries other than China. Also, starting Wednesday, the government will designate Hong Kong and Macau as contaminated areas and will enforce strict quarantine screening on entrance from those 2 countries. Meanwhile, South Korea's third chartered flight to Wuhan will depart Incheon International Airport at 8:45 p.m. on Tuesday local time to bring back some 170 South Korean nationals stuck in the city. The flight is expected to arrive back in Gimpo Airport on Wednesday morning local time. Unlike the previous flights, South Koreans in Wuhan will be joined by their Chinese family members this time. Once home, the group will be quarantined for 2 weeks at the Joint Forces Military University in Incheon, Gyeonggi-do Province, a 90-minute drive from Seoul. That is all I have at this hour, but I'll be back with more updates in our later newscast. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Kim Jae-hee, thank you for that. Now, over in China, the official daily death toll from the coronavirus keeps rising. And for the first time since the outbreak, Chinese President Xi Jinping went to visit some patients at a local hospital. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
The number of deaths each day from the novel coronavirus in China is still increasing. China's National Health Commission said on Tuesday that at least 108 more people died on Monday and 2,478 others were confirmed to have the virus. In total, the country has recorded 1,016 deaths and more than 42,000 infected patients, most of them in Hubei province. Amid mounting concerns over the increasing figures, Chinese President Xi Jinping made his first public appearance on Monday since the start of the outbreak. Wearing a mask, Xi visited a residential community, a hospital, and a district center for disease control and prevention in Beijing. The inspection came at a time when many people outside the lockdown Hubei province resumed work after an extended holiday. At the Beijing Ditan Hospital, a designated institution treating the novel coronavirus, she said the situation at the moment remains very serious, but expressed confidence that China can survive the epidemic.
Let's fight this defense war, this overall war against the epidemic with full confidence. Let's fight this people's war. We must build up our confidence. We will eventually win.
At the hospital, she also made a conference call to frontline medical workers in 3 hospitals in Wuhan to thank them and encourage them.
On behalf of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, I pay my highest respect and extend my sincere thanks to you, to all the medical workers who are combating the epidemic across the country.
While expressing his condolences to those who died in the outbreak, she stressed that the armed forces and people of all ethnic groups in China should stand together with the people of Hubei and Wuhan. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
Now, among the latest coronavirus cases in Europe, none of the patients had been to China. The World Health Organization's concerned that could mean it's about to start spreading quickly around the world. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Earlier this week, 5 British citizens were confirmed to have contracted the novel coronavirus after visiting a French alpine town from another British national who was confirmed to have the virus after returning from a conference in Singapore. None of the patients had any history of traveling to China, yet they still fell ill. According to the head of the World Health Organization, new cases like these could signal the start of a wider spread of the coronavirus.
In recent days, we have seen some concerning instances of onward transmission from people with no travel history to China, like the cases reported in France yesterday and the United Kingdom today. The detection of this small number of cases could be the spark that becomes a bigger fire. But for now, it's only a spark. Our objective remains containment.
His comments come as an advanced WHO team of medical experts arrived in China on Monday to investigate the outbreak. The WHO chief says the team will work with their Chinese counterparts to contain the spread of the virus. Last month, the head of the WHO visited Beijing for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping and agreed to send an international mission to help curb the outbreak. However, it took the Chinese government nearly 2 weeks to approve the team's trip. Meanwhile, a new study has revealed the incubation period of the novel coronavirus could be as long as 24 days. While initial studies revealed a 14-day incubation period, data collected on over 1,000 patients showed the average incubation period was 3 days and could range from 0 to 24 days. Despite the latest findings, the WHO says it's not considering changing the recommended quarantine time of 2 weeks. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, it seems U.S. President Donald Trump is unlikely to meet again with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un before the November presidential election. CNN on Monday cited 2 sources as saying that Trump made his feelings clear on that subject in a recent meeting with his foreign policy advisors. CNN says after months of failed efforts to restart the nuclear talks, President Trump's interest in meeting with Kim has waned. Instead, he's focusing on his re-election campaign. It added that Trump's campaign does not believe North Korea is a critical issue to American voters. In fact, he did not mention North Korea at all during his recent State of the Union address. The success of the South Korean film Parasite, just named Best Picture at the Oscars, is expected to give another boost to the Korean wave, along with huge economic benefits for Korea. Along with K-pop stars BTS, the film's expected to drive growth in the country's cultural exports and consumption. Park Se-young has more.
Parasite has overcome what director Bong Joon-ho called the 1-inch tall barrier of subtitles and has been exported to a record 205 countries. As of early February, the film grossed more than $167 million worldwide. Along with K-pop sensations BTS, Parasite has emerged as a new leader in the export of Hallyu content. For every $100 of exports of cultural content, exports of consumer goods like cosmetics and food increased by $250. BTS is estimated to have a $4.2 billion impact on the Korean economy every year.
With Hallyu exports, people grow more familiar with Korean culture, and the familiarity expands to consumer goods like cosmetics, processed food, and mobile phones.
With that rising popularity, exports of cultural content surpassed home appliance exports for the first time in 2018. And the economic ripple effect amounts to more than $34 billion. Following K-pop, the success of Parasite may mark a new milestone for the export of K-movies. Park Se-young, Arirang News.
And Parasite will be screened starting this weekend at more than 2,000 theaters in North America after its big Oscars win. According to the website Variety, the movie's distributor in North America is planning to double the number of theaters screening Parasite from 1,060 to more than 2,000. Industry watcher Box Office Mojo says Parasite has already generated around $35.5 million in ticket sales in North America. That figure puts it in 6th place among all non-English language movies that have ever been screened there. South Korea's exports were up almost 70% in the first 10 days of this month, thanks to a recovery in exports of cars and semiconductors. Government data showed Tuesday that February's exports so far totaled $10.7 billion compared with the figure last year of $4.4 billion. The Korea Customs Service attributed the jump to 3 more working days compared to last year. The amount of exports per day was around $1.5 billion, a drop from last year of 3%. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Mr. Daniel Yu, Global Strategist at Yuanta Securities. Mr. Yu, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me today.
So despite the coronavirus emergency now global, stocks in New York closed at record highs. What's happening in the global markets?
Sure. As you said, U.S. market is hitting the record highs. If you look at the Dows and S&Ps and NASDAQ, all seems to be hitting the record highs. Dow was up 0.6%, S&P 500 was up 0.73%, NASDAQ was up 1.13%. Particularly the rise of the NASDAQ is quite astonishing, that it has broken to 9,600 territories. Quite soon might be breaking 10,000 territories. The global market as a whole also seems to be recovering quite nicely. If you look at the world ETF, the MSCI World ETF, that price is actually hitting the record highs once again after falling sharply by close to about 5%. The reason for that is because U.S. market seems to continue to be doing well. And also the main reason for this such a strong rise, despite all the concern about the novel coronavirus issues that affects the global economy in terms of the growth rates, it's clearly because of the liquidity condition that's happening in the global market. If you look at the U.S., they're injecting quite heavy amount of liquidity in the short term. Also, China obviously injecting as much as $174 billion worth of liquidities. They're lowering interest rate as well. So there's quite a bit of a amount of liquidity that's happening in the market that it's overseeing the concern about the economic slowdown that you will see in China. If the number of patients rise slows down, then they think that economic growth rate itself also will recover in the second quarter. So people are betting that the economic recovery will happen in second quarter, despite the concern about the first quarter.
Well, here in Korea, we see the Kospi was up quite a bit today after a couple of sessions of losses. The Korea Exchange says volatility, though, has been high so far this year. What's the story in the Korean markets?
Sure, as you said, the Korean market is quite volatile because of its dependency on China. If you look at the overall market, yesterday and the day before it corrected, but today it's up again around 1%. Hitting over 2,200 Kospi and also 680 Kosdaq. Kosdaq was also up about 0.9%. If you look at the correction that we saw in terms of Kospi as well as Kosdaq, it was as high as 8% territories, which is one of the highest level of the losses that we saw because of the coronavirus issues. but it has recovered quite nicely from its bottom. In terms of the economic impact, the Bloomberg estimates that Korea will be one of the highest hit economy because of China's slowdown. It is probably the case because Korea exports close to 1/3 to China, and that would be quite a bit of a showing slowdown. And also, Korea is importing quite a bit of for the productions. They have a lot of production facilities based in China, so Korea will be affected due to that. But despite all that, Kospi is doing well is because their dependency on global economy and that their dependency on U.S. is one of the highest as well. And that there's a huge amount of liquidity injected throughout the global scale, as well as Korea is thinking about probably lowering interest rate in order to fight for this corona impact.
Well, meanwhile, we see oil prices have fallen to a 13-month low. How much of this is the coronavirus, and where do you see oil going from here?
Well, quite a bit is from the coronavirus, I think. If you look at the coronavirus outbreak, it seems to be a black swan for oil and energy industries. If I look at most of the energy industry's valuations, especially in U.S. and other countries, it doesn't look cheap, despite that it has been one of the biggest underperformer. Main reason for that is because of the shale gas production's increase that affects the price to be much lower than used to be. And clearly now with the demand from China slowing down much faster than expected, and China is the #1 importer of oil, even greater than U.S. since 2017. So therefore, if there's a slowdown in the various factories, productions, and many areas of oil consumption from China, clearly this will have a negative implication. So once again, the oil price decline is not because of the production side, but it is because of the demand side slowing down due to China. That will have one leg decline for the overall range trading of oil prices. In the past, oil prices were range bound anywhere between $55 to $65 range. I think it has gone down by at least $5 lower. The range bound should be around $50 as the bottom, and probably on the top, maybe at most $60. Clearly, the additional production coming from the shale gas is a major concern. Despite that, though, the overall supply side can be adjusted in order to keep the oil price at $50 range. So we think that it is at the bottom, and we can look for some opportunities. But in terms of the upside, we think that it is limited.
All right, Mr. Yu, got it. Thanks so much for coming on today and sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, there have been fears for decades of robots and computers making human jobs obsolete. That's been most clearly true in the manufacturing sector, but the rise of artificial intelligence extends such concerns to many more sectors, including administrative staff and even medical professionals. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Faced with a future of automation taking over the workplace, how can we safeguard human jobs? As artificial intelligence, combined with smart devices and robotics, continues to evolve, it's not only manufacturing jobs that human workers are expected to lose.
Robots and automation are about to leave controlled environments like factories and warehouses and enter into unstructured environments like schools, our highways and streets, our hospitals. And in that transition, robots and automation are going to start to affect lots of new sectors of the economy.
By 2022, the World Economic Forum projects 75 million jobs will be lost, with data entry clerks and administrative workers topping the list of replaceable positions. There seems to be no way to prevent automation, but only looking at the jobs themselves may be counterproductive. Experts are suggesting we should focus on tasks rather than jobs.
So, for instance, if you think of a radiologist has many tasks. So the task that relates to looking at an image and making a diagnostic can perhaps be done by a machine, because machines now are very good at image recognition. Replacing that task, image recognition, by a machine would release time for the radiologists to do other things, perhaps better.
It's not all bad news. Automating repetitive tasks frees time for more creative roles and even new occupations that don't yet exist. Some 133 million new positions, according to the World Economic Forum. Experts say businesses shouldn't only set out to maximise profit with machines. They must proactively seek new roles for their employees and offer training and support to help them sharpen their skill sets.
I think that people will see very rapidly this displacement start to happen in about 5 years. So I think there will be a lot more pressure on governments to move once people start seeing jobs displaced. Because ultimately, the economic incentive to displace people is going to be unlike anything we've seen since the last Industrial Revolution.
Social protection is also needed in the form of policies to ensure workers and their livelihoods are not displaced by the wave of automation. Arirang News.
The world-famous investor Jim Rogers is in South Korea for the Pyeongchang Peace Forum. Our Hong Yu got a chance to sit down with him and talk about North Korea as a potential investment if the two Koreas were to reunify, a prospect he says that would be extremely exciting.
Speakers at the Pyeongchang Peace Forum 2020 got together last Saturday, a day ahead of the forum, to take a look around the demilitarized zone in Gangwon-do province. World-renowned investor Jim Rogers, who joined the tour, said it reminded him of his first visit to the DMZ in North Korea.
My first visit to the North Korea. And I thought, oh, gosh, this is a pretty big waste. What are all these kids doing? You know, they were all sitting there ready to kill the guys, the kids on the other side. It was austere, there wasn't much there. Then I went to the DMZ on the South Korean side, and my main impression was, what a waste. You know, why don't they just tear this down and let's have a K-pop concert?
Rogers, who held a session at the forum on creating the new Korean economy, said the Korean peninsula will be the most interesting place in the world to invest in when the 38 parallel opens.
But when something's a disaster, it's cheap. And in North Korea, there are lots of natural resources. There are lots of educated, disciplined labor, educated labor. You put that open with South Korea, with its capital and its management ability, its manufacturing ability, on the Chinese border, 80 million people on the Chinese border. This is going to be an extremely exciting place.
But he said that will only be possible when the 38th parallel opens up. Rogers said that when it happens, he's particularly interested in tourism to the Korean peninsula. He believes opening the border would boost tourism in many parts of the peninsula.
Any opening like that is great. It's good for North Korea, it's good for South Korea, it's good for the peninsula eventually. Anything. The way the Berlin Wall fell was things like that started happening. And the next thing you know, there's one Korea. Any opening is good for the world and is good for Hanwha-do.
Asked about the risk investors could face putting their money into North Korea as the regime's relationship with both South Korea and the U.S. is shaky at best, Rogers said nothing is guaranteed when it comes to investment.
Look at America. America's always changing its mind. So there's risk everywhere. You can invest in America and suddenly have the rug pulled out. It's not just North Korea, everywhere in the world. I would think North Korea is less risky than many places now because they know they need, and if they do something wrong, they're not going to have much of a future.
Rogers said when the two Koreas agreed to open up their border, the Korean peninsula will be the world's hottest investment location for the next 10 to 20 years. Hong Yu, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
The novel coronavirus is